2020 will be remembered as pretty hot garbage of a year, let's be real. But there was some solid games. I mean, Doom Eternal, Animal Crossing, Half-Life Alyx. There were some good ones, but as you'd expect, there were some really, really bad ones. Welcome to Chaos Gaming. Today we're going to be checking out some of the worst reviewed games of the year 2020. Games that you spent your money on and you probably didn't get too good of a deal. Maybe you think you did, I don't know. Let me know which of these you had the misfortune of playing. Drop a like, make sure you had those notifications fully turned on. And let's start off with the Elder Scrolls Blades. Bethesda can't catch a break. I mean, they can they? Now, this is a mobile first-person RPG. It was released for the Android and iOS in May of 2020. And then it got a Switch port a couple days later because mobile game ports to the Switch, well, they always end good, don't they? The story takes place in between Oblivion and Skyrim, and in terms of gameplay, Bethesda really did their best to bring the core gameplay loop of the Elder Scrolls to mobile platforms, but limitations in mobile hardware meant they had to streamline a lot of it. The end result wasn't good. The levels were linear instead of an open world, and the combat was essentially just tapping the same two buttons over and over. Plus, since it was a Bethesda game, there were more bugs than you could count. Elder Scrolls Blades was a mess. The mobile versions were mediocre, and the Switch version was plain awful. And according to Metacritic, it's the 10th worst reviewed game of the entire year. At number 9, Gleamlight. Remember a game called Hollow Knight? Do you remember that? It was an indie game from 2017 that many people called 2D Dark Souls. It was a really, really, really good game. And then along comes Gleamlight, a game that did its best to milk the success of Hollow Knight, and it didn't work. It's a 2D Metroidvania with some elements of the Soulsborne genre thrown in there, but they forgot to throw in the elements that actually make those genres good. It's also forgotten to make the gameplay fun. It wasn't balanced, it wasn't even completely finished, as it's very clear that the game was rushed out the door. Now, it looks good, and you can get some nice screenshots out of it, but as for being a video game, it was a waste of money. Just play Hollow Knight instead. It was good. Gleamlight, bad. Hollow Knight, good. At number 8, Street Power Soccer. So how hard is it to make a good soccer game? I mean, we've had soccer games for over 20 years, and you would think they would have figured out the winning formula by now, but you'd be wrong. Street Power Soccer was released for the Switch, the Xbox One, PS4, and PC in 2020. And I don't think anybody on the platform actually had a good opinion of it. It suffers from both being too complicated and too simple, if that's a thing for a soccer game, especially one that's supposed to be fast-paced and easy to pick up. The game is horrendous. And as of the recording of this video, there's not a single positive review for it on Metacritic. Not one. It's definitely one of the worst games of 2020. We're only at number 8. At number 7, Temerian. It's a weird game. It's a hybrid of a 3D platformer and a third-person shooter with elements of world exploration that maybe you would get from an old-school Rare game on the N64, all with a bright, colorful art style. You could tell the developers were doing their best to pay tribute to Rare, but the end result, it was bad. Now, we've been seeing a lot of games in the last few years that are trying to pay tribute to old 3D platformers like Yooka-Laylee and Mighty No. 9, but Temerian honestly might be the worst. The gameplay is bizarre, the mechanics are very shallow, then it all tops off with this underwhelming level design, and the whole thing is super forgettable. You probably never even played it. It's an interesting case study, but it's not a good game. At number 6, Remothered Broken Porcelain. What a name. The game, I give it the award for the most confusing title. Without playing the game, you'd have no idea what the title is supposed to mean, and if you've ever played it, it still doesn't make much sense. Remothered Broken Porcelain is a survival horror game that serves as both a sequel and a prequel to the previous games in the series, because that always ends well. The atmosphere and the presentation, they're good. The gameplay is where it all falls apart. It's just a boring game to play, and that's also glossing over the countless technical issues. There's AI bugs, there's glitches in the architecture, and there's constant hard crashes. The game wasn't ready to come out. It clearly needed more time in the design phase, and it didn't get it. At number 5, Arc of Alchemist. You know a game is bad when Nintendo Life gives the Switch version a 3 out of 10. Arc of Alchemist is an action RPG released for the Switch and the PS4. Now, the PS4 version, it was a little better, but they were both pretty bad. Honestly, I'm not sure what the vision was for the game. It's very simple, story super basic, and the presentation is something we've seen a million times. Plus, it launched with a $40 price tag, which was laughable for something like this. It feels like a game that's halfway through development, and even that's probably being a little generous, because there's early access games on Steam with more content and variety than you'd get here. I would say avoid it. You'll have a much better time with practically any other RPG on the market. At number 4, Fast and Furious Crossroads. I mean, you need to know you're gambling when you get a Fast and Furious game. Everybody knows that. Now, how hard would it be to make a good one? Seems like a perfect video game material, but for some reason we can't get a good one. Crossroads was released for the PC, the PS4, and the Xbox One. It was supposed to be a hybrid of a racing game and an action RPG, which sounds like it would be a perfect fit for the franchise. Well, it was bad. It was shallow, short, ugly, buggy, and nowhere near as exciting as the movies. It was a hot mess. Now, normally with games like this, you can at least say fans of the franchise will get a kick out of it. But honestly, I think fans of the franchise were the ones that hated Crossroads the most because it was such a massive waste of potential. A racing game action RPG based on the Fast and Furious is such a good idea. I would love to see it revisited by a publisher that actually cared about it. At number 3, Dawn of Fear. Now, survival horror has been in a weird place over the last few years. While there have been a few standouts, the horror genres in general, it's been struggling in the world of video games, and Dawn of Fear might be one of the worst in most recent memory. It's really trying hard to be like the original Resident Evil games, but dramatically failing in every regard. The graphics were bad, the bugs were bad, broken mechanics, perfect showcase of all the outdated things that video games have rightfully left behind in the decades. Yeah, you could tell the developers' hearts were in the right place. But the game simply wasn't ready to come out. It needed at least one more year in the oven. It ended up with an embarrassing 33% on Metacritic from critics and 40% from gamers, which makes it one of the worst reviewed games and the worst reviewed horror game of 2020. At number 2, the game 13. Let's just do that. 13 Remake, I guess. An FPS from 2003 that flew under the radar. It had bad marketing, hefty competition. It did get a cult following, I guess, in the past. It had unique art style. It was addicting, and fans of the classic game were excited when it was being remade. So how'd it turn out? Well, 13 the Remake is a complete mess. It was buggy. The developers decided to completely change the art style, which that's smart, right? And they made it look like just another generic FPS game. They also changed some of the mechanics from the original, which once again took away from the game's character. The original game is a unique cult classic. The remake, it's a buggy, generic, and forgettable FPS that completely, well, let's just be real, it farted all over its predecessor. At number 1, today, Tiny Racer. Yep, Nintendo Switch exclusive that nobody enjoyed. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a racing game that tried to be really dependent on the environments of the track, but the gameplay was bad, the physics were bad, and the mechanics are unfinished. The whole thing, it was laughably unbalanced. And I guess it slightly redeems itself being a budget title. It was only $10, but honestly, that's probably too expensive. Tiny Racer is a freaking terrible game with a 29 on Metacritic. It's the single worst reviewed game of 2020, but I have one more game that I need to throw in as an honorable mention today. Yep. CRYSIS Remastered. It didn't officially make the list, but I put it on here because it's my personal pick for the worst game of the year. It was supposed to be the best looking game ever. After all, it was a remaster of one of the most beautiful games ever made, and that beautiful game is almost 15 years old. So what did we get? A buggy, horrible, optimized, unoptimized mess. It looked worse than the original. How's that even happen? I mean, I have no idea how the game came out the door like this, but I had to give it a little shout and add it to this list. Actually, I know how it happens because they told us later it was actually redone for consoles and not the PC, which is kind of shady. Anyway, there you go. Those are the worst reviewed games of 2020. Let me know if any of these jacked your money. I'll see you guys soon.